Struggling school districts say extra funding approved by state lawmakers was too little, too late. Details on today's Texas Standard.
Texas Standard is a production of KUT Austin, KERA North Texas, Houston Public Media, and Texas Public Radio in San Antonio.
I'm Angela Kocherga in El Paso. Also ahead, independent testing finds toxic metals in black wastewater released by a Tesla refinery near Corpus Christi. Plus, a new book by a Texas doctor, The Preventioneers, Diseases, Disasters, and the Discoveries That Changed Our World. Hand washing is just one example. And finding music and meaning at the Kerrville Folk Festival nearly a year after the flood. All those stories and more just ahead on today's Texas Standard. No matter where you are, it's Texas Standard Time on this second day of June 2026. I'm Angela Kocherga, and so glad you can join us. While students are out enjoying their summer vacations, struggling school districts gave state lawmakers an earful at a hearing in Austin yesterday. They said the $8.5 billion in additional funding approved last session is not enough. Large and small districts are making difficult cuts to staff, including teachers, closing schools, and having a hard time making ends meet. The superintendent of one small district said he can't find money for simple things like fixing scoreboards on playing fields. Here in El Paso, EPISD is considering declaring a financial emergency similar to bankruptcy. The district could cut more than 400 positions, many through layoffs, others from not filling vacancies for teachers or attrition. None of those who testified said the funding would be enough to cope with their dire financial situation. Others said what they got was far less than expected. Here to tell us more is Greta Diaz-Gonzalez-Vasquez. She reports on education for our home station, KUT. Greta, welcome back to the Texas Standard.
Hi, Angela. Good morning.
Well, what was the message the House Public Education Committee heard from school districts during the hearing yesterday?
Yeah, so it was a very long meeting. There was a lot of messages, but if there is one that I can summarize, is pretty much funding has increased, but it's not enough. It hasn't increased significantly. District officials said that they don't have enough funds for daily operations, let alone for what the state is asking them in terms of special education. They also talked about the teacher incentive allotment and the teacher retention allotment, that they have helped, but that teachers are still not staying in districts. And basically, like I said, a lot of people said districts are underfunded.
Well, the last legislative session saw the passage of House Bill 2, which put more money into public schools. Remind us of just how much money and give us some details about where the money went.
Yeah, so that was over $8 billion across the state. Half of that, $4 billion, went into teacher and staff pay raises, and also a new system where more experienced teachers get a salary adjustment. $1.3 billion went to district operational costs, so that is utilities, transportation, insurance, keeping the lights on. $834 million went to special education reforms. It also created funding for special education evaluation that will give in districts $1,000 per evaluation. But people I talked to yesterday told me that those evaluations could cost up to $5,000. And then there's also, of course, the increase of the per student basic allotment, which was $55, which districts and advocates said over and over yesterday was not enough to keep up with inflation.
Now, you focus on Austin ISD. What is that district's financial situation, and how representative of the rest of the state is it?
Yeah, so AISD is in a big budget deficit. It's working to cut $181 million right now. AISD officials didn't attend the meeting, but a lot of parents and teachers did. The district closed a total of 11 schools last week. They're also cutting staff for next school year, which will impact over 200 positions, including teachers, and now we know also librarians. So parents and teachers who testified said that kids are feeling this budget deficit. Teachers are feeling it. I talked to Eric Ramos, an AISD teacher, and this is what he said.
It's hard to say they're working in good faith for me when they have a huge budget surplus and are making no effort to increase funding to a realistic level for public education.
The surplus that is mentioned, yesterday they said it was $4.7 billion in unspent funds and $27.4 billion in the rainy day fund. So it's over $32 million in surplus. So when it comes to how representative AISD is with, the overall state, I would say district across the state, small and big, are feeling the financial pressure. We see El Paso, as you know very well, Crystal City. In Central Texas, we also see Hays CISD. Pflugerville is also closing schools. And legislatures themselves yesterday complained about how the formulas that are being used to fund districts do not match up with what was presented during the passing of HB 2 last year. John Bryant said that Dallas ISD had expected an increase in funding of $134 million for next school year, and that they only saw a $4 million increase. So now he said that now Dallas is operating in red numbers because they were expecting more money.
Yeah, dire situation. What is causing schools to be so low on funds right now?
I would say it's a lot of things. District and advocates say that the per student allotment has not kept up with inflation. Instead of that $55 increase, they said it should have gone up $1,596 per student if it had kept up with inflation. Enrollment has also gone down across the state, with birth rates down, and in some districts the attendance rate is down. And we know that in Texas, schools are funded by attendance rate. In AISD, for example, it has been mentioned that attendance is down because of immigration law enforcement. Parents are afraid to take their kids to school, and so the district gets less money. But then also property values in some places are down, like in Austin, for example, which means less funding. And yesterday, state funding kept coming up. I would go back to that. Paul Newhoff is the CFO of Navarro ISD, and he said that utilities have significantly gone up in the last few years and that the funding has just not kept up.
In Navarro, our utilities have increased close to 60% since 2019. TRS payments have gone up 62% since 2021. Transportation last year, when we reported to the TEA, our cost per mile on our average cost per mile operating our bus fleet was $3.92 a mile. And that's before the now spike that we have in diesel prices that are going to impact us this year.
So yes, districts have to keep the lights on, and very often with less kids in school, which means less funding.
Well, finally, were there any solutions proposed during the hearing?
Yeah, well, the main solution that was proposed was increasing the basic allotment, keeping up with inflation, and making sure that more teachers can tap into the incentives, the allotments that I mentioned when we started talking. Also giving districts more funds for special education, because that population has significantly increased in the last few years, and districts are running out of money also to do evaluations. And then, well, there's also creative solutions. Some creative solutions came up yesterday. They're not ideal, but districts are doing what they can. And some districts officials said that they're having a hard time retaining non-teaching staff because they are left out of the allotments. But they're getting creative. So La Sarra ISD superintendent said that librarians and school nurses are teaching some classes so they can also access the allotments that are available for teachers.
We've been speaking to Greta Diaz-Gonzalez Vasquez, who reports on education for our home station, KUT. Greta, thank you so much for your reporting.
Thank you, Angela.
Texas grid operators are preparing for an influx of data centers. In the first quarter of this year alone, nearly 200 proposed data centers and other large energy users requested to join the grid. Many of those projects may never come to fruition. Houston Public Media's Natalie Weber tells us the state's electric grid manager, ERCOT, is voting on a process today that could help weed out some of the speculative projects.
Currently, data centers and other high-energy users, such as cryptocurrency miners and industrial facilities, are seeking a combined 438 gigawatts of power in Texas. That's more than 5 times the amount of electricity used to power the entire state during record-breaking demand. But that number is likely inflated by proposed facilities that will never be built.
I haven't really believed the numbers for 2 years now.
University of Texas research scientist Joshua Rhodes says in the past, these facilities would go to their local utility provider and ask to join the power grid. But with so many data centers looking to connect to the grid, Rhodes says that's no longer feasible.
You end up in this never-ending restudy loop because you just can't get a feel for, okay, is this transmission going to go for this data center, but now it's being used by this data center?
Now, ERCOT is developing a new process to evaluate these projects in batches. Rhodes says the agency is trying to understand which data center projects are actually feasible and what infrastructure is needed to build them.
The criteria may include things like if you have the land, if you have the financing, if you already have ordered components and parts and computers and things like that are going to ship.
Matt Baums, with the Texas Advanced Energy Business Alliance, has also been following how ERCOT is responding to this influx of project proposals. He says data centers will also have to make a financial commitment in order to be evaluated before joining the grid.
The thinking there would be for large loads to put up some investment and some guarantee that they're really coming to do business here in Texas.
As the state faces a ballooning energy demand, Baum says ERCOT's new process could help create a more reliable grid.
It's saying that large loads can't just appear on the system faster than ERCOT can study them. Transmission providers can plan for them, and the grid can reliably serve them.
ERCOT is still determining who will be included in its first study of data centers, and just exactly what criteria they will have to meet. Tech industry leaders have already provided hours of public comment at ERCOT meetings, as the agency continues to grapple with potential changes. In a statement, the Data Center Coalition, a trade group, told Houston Public Media it's still seeking clarity from ERCOT regarding many components of the new process. That includes factors such as timelines, criteria for joining ERCOT's first study, and how projects are prioritized. If ERCOT approves the new process on Tuesday, it will go to a vote in July by the Public Utility Commission of Texas, which oversees ERCOT. Speaking at a meeting earlier this year, ERCOT Vice President Jeff Billow acknowledged the importance of developing a more structured process for adding data centers to the grid.
There are a lot of companies that are interested in doing business in Texas, which means there are a lot of people whose livelihoods are impacted by the work that we do here to integrate those large loads.
I'm Natalie Weber in Houston.
More Americans are making tough decisions like whether to eat or save money by skipping a meal. A look at growing food insecurity ahead on The Standard.
Support for Texas Standard comes from the online UT High School, offering a full-time diploma program for remote, asynchronous learners throughout Texas. More at highschool.utexas.edu/tuition-free. Support for Texas Standard comes from Texas Realtors, providing representation at every stage of the home ownership journey, helping clients understand their options and manage complex transaction details. Info at texasrealestate.com.
You've got it tuned to the Texas Standard. I'm Laura Rice. We know today that before and after a doctor interacts with a sick patient, they should wash their hands or change their gloves. As we all learned during the pandemic, washing your hands and washing them well is kind of germ spread prevention 101. But that always wasn't well known. It took a Hungarian doctor's observation, concern, and then a strong commitment to spreading the news of discovery, despite resistance, to make hand washing a now common medical practice. It's one example of many in a new book by a Texas doctor called The Preventioneers: Diseases, Disasters, and the Discoveries That Changed Our World. With its publication, UT Health Houston professor emeritus Barry Davis wants not just to educate us about the past, but to inspire future change. Dr. Davis, welcome to the Texas Standard.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you for having me.
Tell me about the impetus of this book. I know your work has included clinical trials in cardiovascular disease prevention. Why did you want to go back and highlight these big moments of prevention of the past?
Sure. I wrote it because prevention is one of the most powerful ideas in public health. And after decades in medicine, public health, and clinical trials, I kept coming back to one question. Why do we so often wait to prevent harm until after the losses are undeniable? Again and again, people see danger early, whether it be fire, infection, unsafe cars, smoking, high blood pressure, climate change, and try to warn society before the damage becomes overwhelming. And I decided to write a book about the people who did something about that and about the gap that I call between warning and action.
Well, I mentioned the hand washing example, and you alluded to a couple other there. Your book explores 8 preventions, each in its own chapter. Is there one that you were especially passionate about highlighting?
Well, probably the first one, because that's where I began. And the reason I began there is because of the famous phrase, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And most people have heard that phrase. Some people know it's Benjamin Franklin, but very few people know that he was talking about fire prevention and not medicine.
Yeah.
So it's a very interesting story, actually starting when he was about age 5. Fire destroyed most of the city of Boston, at least the central part of it, and it came within a block of where he lived. And eventually, when he lived in Philadelphia, and he published a newspaper called the Pennsylvania Gazette. There was a huge fire in Pennsylvania, and he decided to take all this knowledge that he had learned over the years from Boston and from living in London, and he wrote himself an anonymous letter. Franklin did that all the time. And in that letter, he used the phrase, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. But he also laid out in that letter ways to prevent fires and to suppress fires. He started something called the Union Fire Company, which was one of the first fire companies in the United States. He actually became a fireman himself. He invented the Franklin stove and the lightning rod, which would help to prevent fires in their own ways. So he became very committed.
Well, your book comes out as some have decried a sort of war on science as federal health policy and funding has changed under the new Trump administration. Is that a coincidence in timing?
No. I mean, one of the other inspirations was at the beginning of the pandemic when I realized that there were so many things that needed to be done, even though we didn't have a vaccine yet. And people were meeting resistance about it. I couldn't understand that. I realized there's this pattern across history when people are these crusaders or pioneers of prevention. They see a preventable harm, and then they try to find a solution and translate that solution into something actionable.
I could see somebody arguing back that science has been wrong in the past. I can think about something like phrenology, which was focused on skull shape, or even more recently, something like blood splatter analysis, which is just not nearly as accurate as DNA. Is it healthy to sometimes have skepticism or to demand more evidence?
Of course, that's what science is all about. Skepticism. That's how science progresses. But there's a point where the science, the evidence becomes overwhelming. And it's a question of whether you act on the evidence or you keep on waiting for more evidence. And I present many stories in the book where people wouldn't act on the evidence right away. In the case you brought up, Semmelweis, he's now known for that, but actually most of his story, the hand washing, most of his story isn't well known. And that although he did institute that, people didn't want to follow it because it went against the grain of what they believed was causing the disease, and also because it implied that the doctors were not clean. They had dirty hands, and they didn't like that. But also, I mean, I talk about the tobacco and smoking. Many, many years, incredible resistance to do something about it. And people persisted and persisted and persisted, and finally things happened. It's the same with the cars. I talk about cars, too, the design of cars. Many people fought for changes in the design of cars for years, and it took a long time before something was done about it. And even today, there's problems. People don't do things that they should.
I mean, Texas, where you've spent so much of your career, I think maybe has a reputation of doing things its own way sometimes. Do you think that makes this state more ready to drive a path towards radical action in prevention, or less so?
Probably I can answer the question is yes and no.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't necessarily use the term radical action. I mean, prevention doesn't call for radical action. It calls for just change, at least change in outlook and then maybe change in doing something. It doesn't have to occur immediately. It can occur over a period of time. But there are many things that occur in Texas that we have to be aware of. Obviously, the climate, whether we have hurricanes or floods or heat, we're aware of that and we try to do things. Sometimes it's slow in trying to deal with it, whether we have like wildfires or stress on the electric grid. These are things where you got to go back and think about what can be done so that this won't happen again. But there should also be a mindset that before it happens, what can we do? And I think Texans have a lot of spirit and they can do these kind of things.
I could see people with science backgrounds being especially interested in this book, but who do you really hope will read it?
Well, I hope more people will read it. First of all, the way I wrote the book, I didn't really have much in the way of figures and graphs. It's just chock full of stories, very interesting stories, dramatic stories. But it also has a message to it, obviously. That prevention is, as I said, one of the most powerful ideas in public health, but its success is invisible. You don't see the fire that didn't happen or the stroke that didn't happen or the injuries from a car crash that didn't happen. But people, if they have sort of a prevention mindset, maybe even not necessarily on the large scale that I'm talking about, but even in their own lives, they can think of things that they can do which would prevent bad things from happening.
Barry Davis is a professor emeritus at UT Health Houston and the former chair in public health. His new book is The Preventioneers. Dr. Davis, thank you again.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Support for Texas Standard comes from Barron, Adler, Clough & Odo, a Texas eminent domain and condemnation law firm, helping to protect the rights of Texas property owners for more than 40 years. More at barronadler.com. Support for Texas Standard comes from TrialMed, conducting clinical research for over 30 years. Info on current trials in Texas at trialmed.com.
From the Texas Newsroom, I'm Tom Perumian. The uninsured rate for young Texas kids is the highest in the country, and it's rising. KERA's Avery Escamilla-Wendell has more.
A new analysis by the Georgetown University Center for Children and Families shows the uninsured rate for Texas kids under 6 rose from 7.9 to 10.8% between 2022 and 2024. Elizabeth Burak is a senior fellow at the center. She says children are impacted by the lack of insurance.
When they don't have access to the care that they need in those early years, they're at higher risk of falling behind developmentally.
The center points to Medicaid unwinding after the end of the COVID-19 public health emergency as one reason for the increase in uninsured kids nationwide. I'm Avery Escamilla-Wendell in Dallas.
The Federal Aviation Administration has selected the first school in Texas to join a national initiative to recruit more air traffic controllers. Texas Public Radio's Corey Cook reports.
Angelo State University in San Angelo will implement the Enhanced Air Traffic Collegiate Training Initiative, known as ECTI. The program allows students who complete required coursework to bypass the FAA Academy in Oklahoma City and move directly to on-site air traffic control training and employment. Mark Arzotti is lead instructor for the program at ASU.
The schoolhouse can only take so many there in Oklahoma City, but if you can partner up with several other places, it's definitely going to make the workplace environment much, much better, give people an opportunity to have maybe that work-life balance.
The agreement comes as the FAA works to address staffing shortages across the country due to the high stress of the job, early retirement, and government shutdowns. I'm Corey Cook in San Antonio.
There's a change to the requirement for drivers wanting to get a commercial driver's license. The test is now only available in English. In September, Governor Abbott ordered DPS to drop the Spanish language option for the CDL test to comply with federal guidelines. Commercial drivers will also be evaluated for their English language proficiency during stops and could lose their license if they don't meet competency standards. The artist behind the iconic whale mural in downtown Dallas is suing after his creation was painted over to create space for a mural promoting the World Cup. Marine artist Robert Weiland says he wasn't notified and wasn't compensated before the mural was destroyed. He's filed a $25 million lawsuit against FIFA as well as the operators of the building. I'm Tom Perumian in the Texas Newsroom.
Support for these Texas headlines comes from Half Price Books, a Texas-bred new and used bookstore, proudly supporting public media and sustainability by keeping books, music, and other media in circulation. Store locations and more information at hpb.com.
It's the Texas Standard. I'm Laura Rice. South Texas is facing a water crisis. The big focus has been on Corpus Christi's impending water emergency. Now there's concern a brand new Tesla lithium refinery in Robstown is polluting nearby waterways. Inside Climate News reports that there's a disconnect over whether Tesla's discharge of black wastewater into a drainage ditch is a violation of its permit. Independent testing found toxic metals in the water. Arcelia Martin has been following this story. Arcelia, thank you for coming on the Texas Standard.
Hey, thanks for talking about our story.
Well, this lithium refinery near Corpus Christi only opened in January. When did questions about its drainage begin to arise?
Within that first month, so there were some drainage ditch workers who were out there doing routine maintenance work, and they noticed a pipe that was discharging what they called black liquid into their drainage ditch. And so they called their higher ups, and that's kind of how they got started realizing that Tesla had been permitted by the state to discharge its wastewater from its lithium refinery.
So who issued a test of the drainage and what did that find?
So there were two tests. The TCEQ, which is our state's environmental regulator, after hearing complaints about the reported black liquid, they sent out their own investigator to check that out. And the TCEQ came back and said that Tesla was within its permits. And so that caused the drainage district, the Nueces County Drainage District, to commission its own third-party water testing. And that's when they found hexavalent chromium, lithium, arsenic, strontium, and other chemicals and metals at heightened levels that they were concerned about.
So is the TCEQ saying we found the same things and it's not a problem, or are they saying their test results are different?
Well, the metals and pollutants found in the independent lab aren't allowed in Tesla's wastewater permit. So Tesla submits pollutants that they expect to discharge and that they are planning to discharge, and the TCEQ approves those, and they go through a whole permitting process. So the results of, the difference between these lab results calls into question the efficacy of the state's oversight measures for these environmental issues and industry's compliance of those rules.
So what are the concerns that these toxins could bring about for the area?
So the metals and chemicals found in that third-party lab result, they could erode the ditch's infrastructure, and that could increase flood risk for nearby residents of Nueces County. And also that wastewater flows into a creek and then into Baffin Bay, which is a sensitive waterway that has long been a fishing spot. And there's concern that if humans were to eat fish that were contaminated with these toxins, that it could be harmful to human health.
So how are local officials responding to the findings?
Well, they were really concerned. And previously they had trouble, they told me, talking with Tesla, getting someone from the company to have an in-person conversation with them. And after, our story published and other reports came out, the drainage district told me that they were able to meet with Tesla and that they're hoping to rectify this. But Tesla and the TCEQ kind of publicly discredit these lab results because they weren't taken in the same place that testing is done for the TCEQ permit. So there is some disagreement about whether or not these results are viable.
This news comes at a time when South Texas, as I mentioned earlier, is facing a water crisis. How might this Tesla situation affect those efforts?
Well, Texas relies on the TCEQ to protect public health and our natural resources, especially, as you said, the region's water supply is only becoming more precious. And I think that's a sentiment felt by residents, by local legislators, and definitely industry as well. They're feeling, the potential outcome of having restricted water use. So I think every drop counts.
What are you watching? What might come next in this back and forth? It really does seem like folks just aren't on the same page right now.
I'm curious about the environmental regulators' permitting and investigations for this industrial wastewater permit, but also others, and, what the precedent looks like for permitting pollutants in ecologically sensitive areas like what we're talking about here and across South Texas, especially as we're dealing with this water crisis and facing restrictions.
In the meantime, is this discharge just continuing to go out?
The last I heard is yes.
Arcelia Martin is with Inside Climate News. Arcelia, thanks again for coming on the Texas Standard.
Thank you so much.
Support for Texas Standard comes from Texas Casa. For a child in foster care, small moments today can have a big impact tomorrow. More on how lending time and support can help make a difference at becomeacasa.org. Support for Texas Standard comes from Texas Mutual Insurance Company, a workers' compensation provider that's been caring for hardworking Texans for over 30 years. More at texasmutual.com/expert partner.
This time on our broadcast, we heard our special segment this month highlighting one of the top 10 moments in Texas music history. Alas, we can't play it here on our podcast because of issues with music streaming rights. However, you can check it out over at texasstandard.org or find a version on Texas Standard's Facebook or Instagram page. In fact, if you visit us at our website, you can take advantage of an opportunity to cast your own ballot for the greatest Texas songs of all time. Once again, our website, texasstandard.org.
9 miles southwest of Kerrville, you'll find Quiet Valley Ranch, host to the Kerrville Folk Festival for more than half a century. It's one of Texas's quirkiest traditions, a folk music mecca for singer-songwriters and the people who love listening to them. After last year's devastating floods, it's also a gathering place that many festival goers say is more meaningful than ever. Texas Public Radio's Jack Morgan takes us there.
Welcome home.
The greeting at the gate was simple. Welcome home. The phrase appeared on signs throughout the grounds and was repeated often by festival goers. Austinite Jeannie Hastings has been coming to the Kerrville Folk Festival for decades.
I first came out to Kerrville Folk Festival in 1978. I was 18 years old.
Hastings became an unofficial guide, taking me around and introducing me to people she's met over the years. Greg Bruce and his wife don't just come for the music.
We have a booth that we vend at, selling vintage clothing and Juniper Fair vintage wear.
And when people gather year after year, friendships deepen.
Our friends we make every year, they just multiply.
I came across an Austinite with deep roots to the festival.
My name is Olive Clementine Massey, but at Kerrville, I'm Ollie Clem. My mom is the crew leader of the trash crew in recycling, and she's Kelly Woe, or Mama Woe.
Olive said there was, strangely, one very small upside to last year's floods. Volunteers who came to help the Kerrville community recover were introduced to the festival for the first time.
People came and volunteered just to help around Kerrville, and now we have 40% up ticket buyers. They're all newcomers.
The campgrounds are also where longtime attendees find creative and sometimes absurd ways to entertain themselves.
In the campgrounds, we have some like Curdy Gras, which is Mardi Gras, but it's Kerrville style, and we dance and take courtesy carts, which is the little golf carts, and put decorations all over them and then dance and make music.
Olive has also embraced the idea that Kerrville is more than just a place you visit every May.
It is my home. Instead of coming to Kerrville and saying, welcome to Kerrville, it's welcome home.
Jeannie Hastings was here during the flood and nearly witnessed a tragedy.
Met a gentleman from Germany, and he and his car got washed away down on Turtle Creek, and we happened to be witness to that. I went downstream with a flashlight looking for him. Fortunately, he came out of the river, and no harm was done except to that rental car he had.
Yeah. Another tradition at the festival, Parents bringing their children year after year until those kids eventually find their own place in the community. Gary Cross says there are adults here now who first arrived in diapers.
Sawyer used to come by our camp when he was, 3.5, 4, with his little plastic guitar. His mom and dad would bring him by every day. He's now just graduated from the Nashville School of Music.
This isn't just a campground. It's a temporary community where many people stay for the Folk Festival's 18-day run. Cross said his 28 years of going have taught him this.
Every adult Kerr kid that I know is a good human being, without fail, every single one of them.
He suggested I let the music drifting from campsite to campsite draw me in.
That's the way to really experience this, is wander. You follow your ear and your heart, go where the music leads you.
I didn't have to wander far. Cross's sprawling tent setup featured a refrigerator, folding chairs, guitars, and plenty of people playing them.
I'm Aaron Potter. I'm from San Diego, California.
Potter looked right at home.
For me, it's mostly about, jamming, getting to know people, meeting, other songwriters especially. It's really helpful to developing material to get another ear on it.
Potter was having a blast when I moved on to the next campsite.
My name is Bill Nash. I've been coming to Kerrville since 1994. Been playing music all my life.
He's not kidding. Nash started on French horn, then picked up the guitar at 14.
I played horn all the way through college. I got a degree in composition and orchestration, which was because I wanted to be the next John Williams.
Nash has accomplished a great deal, despite a major challenge.
I'm in my 38th year with MS.
As I wandered to another campsite, I came across what looked like nearly a pickup load of sand.
My name is Christy Atkinson, and I am from the Franklin, Texas area, which is near College Station. My father, the amazing Walter, is from South Padre Island, Texas.
She was building an elaborate sandcastle when I walked up.
He's especially known as the arch wizard. He makes arches and towers, and he's a castle guy, so I learned to be a castle girl, too.
Atkinson thinks her fascination with Kerrville makes perfect sense.
My background is in performance art. I was a clown with Ringling Brothers Circus for about 5 years. I've traveled all over the place doing entertainment.
Christy punctuated nearly every sentence with laughter.
They need to find something new to do. If you don't love it, do something else. Life's short.
Everyone we'd heard so far had been out at the campsites. I decided to head up to the main stage area as the evening entertainment began. This was Yasmin Williams. I asked for her favorite musicians.
Nirvana, Jimi Hendrix, Iron Man by Black Sabbath. And then I discovered alternate tunings kind of a year into playing. And then that was what I was interested in. I learned Blackbird by the Beatles, my first fingerstyle kind of song, and I was hooked.
Williams' guitar technique was rhythmic and sophisticated and warmly received by the audience. This was the first Kerrville Folk Festival since the July 4th floods devastated parts of the hill country. But across Quiet Valley Ranch, people talked less about the tragedy than about returning to music, friendship, and traditions. Again and again, festival goers described Kerrville as something more than a festival. They called it home. I'm Jack Morgan in Kerrville.
Support for Texas Standard comes from UT San Antonio, providing education and research for communities across Texas, with a focus on student success and workforce development. The University of Ambition, utsa.edu.
It's the Texas Standard. I'm David Brown. The cost of living in the United States is forcing more people to make really tough decisions like, whether to eat or save money by skipping a meal. We know this because of recent polling by the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. Their survey showed that more people are missing meals now than during the pandemic. Some are also going to food banks more often or dipping into savings to pay for groceries. Joining us now to tell us more, Jeremy Everett, the founder and director of the Baylor Collaborative on Hunger and Poverty at Baylor University in Waco. Professor, welcome to the Texas Standard.
Thank you for having me.
Let's talk about the factors that are driving up food insecurity in the United States right now. What would you point to specifically?
Well, obviously inflation. I mean, we're all feeling it, whether that be at the gas pump, or when we go to the grocery store and we're spending sometimes upwards of 2 to 3 times what we used to spend. Underemployment is the primary cause of food insecurity in the United States, and then in the U.S. we're just seeing significantly growing rates of food insecurity. But underemployment is typically the driver. Anytime you have rising costs, if you don't have rising incomes to be able to pay for those rising expenses, something's going to have to change. And so families are typically forced to make trade-offs. They have to decide what they're going to choose to pay for on a monthly basis. And unfortunately, food ends up becoming the negotiable item for most households.
This is something that has struck me as I've thought about, like, say, you go to, I don't know, a department store or, a big box store, and it's not at all unlikely that the person who's helping you behind the counter is also having to skip meals. It's, we talk about the face of hunger, and I think a lot of times that's stereotypically sort of coded as people who are begging on street corners. But more and more, to a greater extent than any time we've seen since, I think, as this report mentions, worse than pandemic times. The face of hunger is all around us in a sense.
Yeah, that's right. And I would say, in the pandemic, the big difference was we had a wide array of different interventions that were there to try to support households in those difficult times.
Right.
And so, so we had the stimulus payments. We had all kinds of things that were coming in to be able to help households through that difficult time when people were not able to work with predictability. I think the misnomer is that people are able to work with predictability in normal times, and unfortunately, that's not always the case. But and we have a tendency to misidentify the problem, and so if you tend to blame the poor for their plight as if they are choosing not to work, and that is the cause of their underemployment, or that is the cause of their food insecurity or housing insecurity or lack of access to health care, then your solutions typically reflect that vantage point. But unfortunately, that's not the case. People are working. People are employed. They are that person at the checkout counter, at the grocery store, but they're the ones that are also experiencing very difficult economic circumstances.
Well, with the Baylor Collaborative on Hunger and Poverty, what sort of recommendations can you make or are you making to feed more Texans?
Yeah, I'd say first and foremost is to recognize that no one organization or sector can end hunger by themselves. But very pragmatically, we're going to have a legislative session that will come up this next spring. And in that legislative session, there are a couple of opportunities for our state to be able to come alongside food insecure households.
For
really
example,
well.
what could lawmakers do?
Yeah, they could expand or adopt the summer EBT program, which basically puts an extra $30 on a SNAP card a month for kids when they're out of school. Another one is the SNAP program. Much has been made of the changes to the SNAP program.
Most people think of SNAP as food stamps. Is that what we
They
talk
do.
about? Yeah.
That's right. That's exactly right. And that's what we historically called it. But now it's called the SNAP program, and there are some significant changes passing along a lot of the cost of the SNAP program to the state. And so it's expected that Texas is going to go from spending about $146 million a year to almost $1 billion a year to be able to run that program. So it's a hugely important program, and the state is going to have to decide whether or not it wants to robustly continue to ensure accessibility to that program or not, or are we going to choose to not operate that program to its fullest capacity. We've already seen 4 million people around the country kind of moved off of SNAP rolls that are eligible for the program because states are beginning to prepare for how they reduce accessibility to SNAP because of the change in the cost structure. So that's something that we're certainly keeping our eye on.
Jeremy, often when we, talk about hunger in Texas, it's in the context of, food banks and that sort of thing. And I'm wondering what you tell people when someone hears the sort of, gets the sort of picture that you're painting here, and they want to do something, don't know where or how they can contribute. What do you tell them?
There are three things they can do. They can learn about these three things at our website, hungerandpoverty.org. One, food banks. Yes, we have a network through Feeding Texas of about 20 food banks in the state of Texas that are doing a phenomenal job. Another way is our Meals on Wheels. We have great Meals on Wheels programs around the state of Texas, and because of the rising rate of baby boomers coming into fixed incomes, and because costs are rising at a rate far higher than their fixed incomes are, we have a very large number of senior adults in our state that are experiencing high rates of food insecurity. And so volunteering or getting involved, donating to your local Meals on Wheels operation can go a long way for our seniors who've already paved the way for us to be in the roles that we're in today. And then finally, if they want to solve for the problem of hunger, they can create a hunger-free community coalition in their community. They can learn about that model through our website. But if they're like, hey, if our farmers and ranchers are doing enough to make sure that everybody has access to the food that they need to live and thrive, then let's solve the problem in our community. And there's a pathway to do that by learning how to create a hunger-free community coalition in your community.
Jeremy Everett is founder and director of the Baylor Collaborative on Hunger and Poverty at Baylor University. Again, hungerandpoverty.org, and we'll have more resources at our own website, including an extended version of our conversation here, texasstandard.org. Professor Everett, thanks again for speaking with us on The Standard.
Of course.
We're out of time for today's program, but you can keep up with the news 24/7 at texasstandard.org and look for us on social media at Texas Standard. Our producers and reporters include Sarah Ash, Shelley Brisbane, Michael Marks, and Sean Saldana. Raul Alonso is our digital producer, Leah Scarpelli is our director, and Casey Cheek is our technical director. From all of us at The Standard, thanks for listening. I'm Angela Kocherga, wishing you the very best from El Paso.
Philanthropic support for Texas Standard comes from Casey and Scott O'Hare, the Winkler Family Foundation, Lynn Dobson and Greg Wooldridge, Adrian Killam, and the George Huntington family.